Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Lilith and today I am reviewing Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk. So Even Though I Knew the End is like a sapphic queer noir, fantasy, romance, a lot of genres all up in there. It was a short read. I started it on January 20th and I finished it on January 24th. And that's also with like college classes and stuff, so. But it's 135 pages, 136 pages. Quick read if you want a short read, and it will hurt you. I'm telling you that right now, it will hurt you. I did cry several times while reading it. So our main character is Helen Brandt, which is this detective slash like warlock. She uses spells for her detective work, which is really cool. There's her brother, Ted, who he does magic for this thing called the Brotherhood of the Compass. And then we also get Edith, Helen's girlfriend. And those are our main characters primarily for the book. It takes place in Chicago, 1941, and from what I understood while reading the book, this is a fantasy where most people aren't aware of the existence of magic. It takes place in the regular world. There's only a select few people who know that magic exists. The book is separated into 5 acts with 3 to 6 chapters per act. Most of them fall around 5 to 6, but there's one that only has 3. I didn't really see the point of the acts while I was reading the book. I didn't really see like a designated like space like, oh, here's what happens in this act, here's what happens in this act, of like a clear line basically of why it was separated out like that. All that being said, I'm going to get into the book, so spoilers ahead. If you don't want to be spoiled, if you want to read the book yourself, I would stop watching now. Otherwise, I'm going to get into it. Act 1, Chapter 1. Helen, again our main character, is out investigating the murder of Kelly McIntyre, or McIntyre, I've heard it pronounced both ways, also referred to as Nightingale McIntyre. It is never elaborated upon why she's referred to as Nightingale. We don't really get any further information about her too much, just Nightingale or Kelly McIntyre was murdered. And Helen is investigating it because this lady named Marlowe asked her to, for like $50. And again, this is 1941, so that's a lot of money. So she took it, and she has a date with Edith in the evening, and she's like, I shouldn't have taken it, I'm gonna run late for my date, but $50 is $50. And right off the bat, like, one of the things that I wanted to note was like the lack of elaboration. A lot of it feels like you're expected to know and understand like some of the magic and stuff that's being talked about, and right away on the first page we have, naturally everything was going wrong. It was Luna's fault. Moonlight sparkled off freshly smashed light bulbs. It glittered on the wet asphalt underfoot, casting my shadow over the cleanest patch of back alley you ever saw behind a butcher shop. I held up the plumb of a pendulum and tried again. And it doesn't elaborate on who Luna is. It says it was Luna's fault. And then it again on the next page, it says, I tilted my head back. Luna flirted around on the edge of a cloud, but didn't quite slip coyly behind it. And I was like, okay, whatever. Don't know who Luna is. Maybe it'll be answered later. Totally forgot about it until I was going back and writing the script, and now I'm like, oh, she was referring to the moon. Luna is the moon, the moonlight. It was not elaborated upon at all. And so I forgot about it, and I don't know why, like, you wouldn't elaborate upon it. You're just expected to, like, understand. And the main character does, like, not like astrology, but kind of like astrology, like numerology, stuff like that, with the planets and stuff like that. Maybe it's not numerology. I don't know. It wasn't elaborated upon, so I couldn't tell you. But yeah, just words and language and stuff that's not actually explained. So Helen uses a spell to see where blood had been before the space was like cleaned up, and she sees a bunch of sigils she doesn't know how to read. Later, as she's investigating, her brother Ted and this other guy named Delaney show up, and they're both members of this thing called the Brotherhood of the Compass, Why is it called that? I don't know. It's not elaborated upon. I don't know what the compass is. I don't know why it's this brotherhood, but it's the Brotherhood of the Compass. And she tries to talk to him, but he ignores her mostly because she was kicked out of the Brotherhood and designated as a warlock. And the reason for this was because she sold her soul. The reason she did this, we learn later, is that Ted and her parents died in an accident. I think it was like a train or something like that, maybe, or a car, some sort of accident. And so she sold her soul to bring her family back, and she was only allowed to bring one member back, so she chose Ted. And it also is shared with us in this chapter that she only has 3 days left before, like, her time spent on Earth is up because of her deal. That's a lot for chapter 1. A lot happens in that first chapter. A lot of the chapters have much shorter summaries. So she leaves the scene after the Brotherhood shows up, and she puts her photo negatives through the developer before getting ready for her date. It talks about like the developing photos and stuff. I don't know what that whole process is, because then she does more developing of them later with Edith, even though I thought she already did. But I did not grow up in the era of developing photos, unfortunately. I had digital cameras, so she like develops the photo negatives, and then Marlowe calls her. Marlowe is the lady who asked her to investigate the case in the first place. So Marlowe calls her to invite her to breakfast the next morning to talk about the case. And then it goes to chapter 3. She is 45 minutes late to her date with Edith at this thing called The Wink, which is a women's queer bar, like a speakeasy type thing. And she goes in and she like low-key flirts with everyone, which I thought was interesting, because it was very like Edith and Helen, they're super in love, they've been together for 2 years, but then she also like low-key flirted with everyone, and I was like, that's a little odd for like the narrative, I guess. I don't know, maybe it's just me and how I view relationships, but I thought that was kind of strange, and like against like the narrative. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, so she meets Edith at the bar, and Edith tells her news that she got a job offer in San Francisco, which like, oh, my soul, because Helen's due to die in 3 days from her deal. So she's like, oh yes, we'll totally go to San Francisco together, and meanwhile she's like, I am going to die and I cannot do this with the person I love. Ouch. And that was definitely one of the parts where I cried. I was like, oh, my soul. Oh. Anyway. So chapter 4, the two of them walk home after their date. Edith also has a sort of magic. It's not like as crazy strong as Helen's, where like Helen can like make spells and stuff like that, but Edith can like read minds occasionally. It wasn't exactly described how like strong it works, or if she had any control over it, if it was like, it seemed like it was maybe like stronger like thoughts or like repetitive thoughts or something like that, but it's not really elaborated upon. Chapter 5, so they get up in the morning, and then Helen wants to get a photo of Edith feeding the birds from the window, but noting how her face always like ends up blurry in photos, like there's a glitch essentially when she takes photos of her. But she goes to have breakfast with Marlowe, and Marlowe reveals that she is actually the demon that owns Helen's soul. She says that if Helen can find the White City vampire, she'll return her soul to her along with a payment of $1,000. So now Helen is on like this very tight timeline, because again, she only has like 3 days, maybe now only 2 days. I wasn't sure of like how the timeline of like, oh, like the day that it starts and then she has 3 more days, or if it was like one of the 3 days. So she has 3-ish days, I think. But she's been put on this very tight timeline now to investigate this case, to get her soul back and live the life that she wants. We are on to Act 2. So the first thing she does after meeting with Marlowe is she goes and buys a pack of silk handkerchiefs. Not elaborated upon until the end of the book. She searches a newspaper for other names of the White City vampire victims. I'm just gonna start saying vampire because White City vampire is a mouthful. It's not an actual vampire, she doesn't know what it is, but that's like the killer's like nickname essentially that the city's given him. So she searches a newspaper for other names of vampire victims. And after getting those, she heads to newspaper archives for further research to like look at obituaries and stuff to see if there's something that she can piece together that all of the victims have in common. So she discovers all the victims hit a patch of good luck about 10 years previous, which hints to her that all the victims had sold their souls, as 10 years was like the standard agreement for like how long you were allowed to live after making your deal. And she's mad that Marlowe did not tell her this key fact because it would have helped a lot, and she wouldn't have wasted time digging through newspaper obituaries when she only has 3 days to solve the case. And like, understandable, I would be mad too. Because Marlowe definitely knows. And then she was like, you have dropped me into a turf war between demons. This is stupid. Because she's like, yeah, if all these people have deaths, then the person killing them is a demon. What the heck? And like, again, understandable. I would be mad too. And Marlowe is like, look, you won't have to do a confrontation. Just find out who it is, and then summon me, and I'll deal with it. And then Marlowe also refers to Helen as Elena. This is not elaborated upon. Helen isn't like, Marlowe, like, she calls me this because, it's not like, why is she calling me this? Nothing. It's not elaborated upon at all. I have no idea why. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why. So, Helen goes back to her office building / apartment. I'm not really sure if it's both, if there's a separate building. I'm pretty sure it's one. But Edith still has to go out, and Helen ensures she has like a gun with enchanted bullets, just in case, because she's like, demons will use you as like collateral damage, so like make sure you're safe. But before Edith goes out, she helps Helen process the photos she took, and then Edith seems to recognize something in one of the photos, but like doesn't share it with Helen at all. She's like, no, there's nothing to worry about, don't worry about it. And then she heads out. So Helen analyzes the photos after Edith leaves and notices 2 things. So she had managed to snap a photo of Delaney and Ted, like surreptitiously as she was heading out, and she noticed that Delaney also has like the same sort of camera glitch with his face that Edith has. And then she also notices that the vampire left a blood trail, like she sees blood like on like the corner of a building, and she's like, I can follow that. So she goes back to the murder site, and her brother is there, and he apologizes for how he treated her, and says he does miss her, but definitely still looks down on her for selling her soul. He was like, I was in heaven, it was great, and then you ripped me away from it. But he still decides to help her, and she uses a spell she made on her pendulum to follow the blood trail, which leads them to the middle of an intersection before just disappearing. It just drops and disappears, like there's no trace of what could have happened to the vampire. And then they discuss it a bit, and then Ted leaves. He just leaves. He's like, good luck with your doing. And she's like, well, you know where to find me. He's like, yeah, okay. And vanishes. Act 3, Chapter 1. So Helen's back home, all of her wards are set up, and then she just gets drunk and sleeps for a bit, and she was frustrating me here. I'm like, girl, your soul is on the line and at risk. Why are you just getting drunk? Please lock in, actually. And I wrote in my thing, I was like, she's starting to piss me off here. So Edith comes home late, but she's like possessed by this angel named Heraniel. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And Heraniel has always like been dormant inside of her, but like aware, and she was like aware of it, and it's why she can like read thoughts. And then there's this line. I did not write down my page number because why would I do that? It's right here. I found it. So Helen says, angels were real. They were real. And like, like, she seems surprised by it. I'm like, you sold your soul. You are actively dealing with demons. Why are you suddenly so surprised that angels are real? Of course they would be real. Girly pop. Why wouldn't they be real? Anyway. She just seemed really surprised by it. I'm like, why would it be surprising? So, Haraniel also wants Helen to track down the White City vampire before suddenly being like, there's another murder that just happened, and teleports her to the scene of it. Haraniel also refers to her as Elena. Again, never elaborated on or questioned at all. No idea why. Does not elaborate. The same sigils are painted out like with the last scene she investigated, and then the police show up and shoot at the both of them and they both get shot. So Haraniel teleports them away from the crime scene into a church and heals both of their bodies from all the gunshot wounds, because Edith's body took like 5 gunshots. So like, thankfully, like, she was being possessed by this angel, or she would have been dead. And then Helen had gotten shot once in the shoulder. But Haraniel fixes them all up and they're good. And then Ted and Delani are just also at the church, and they kind of are like, you shouldn't be here. But there's also this priest who Haraniel and Helen talk to. And the priest is also sharing a body with this angel named Zashiel. And then they just leave again, because they just kind of fill Zashiel in on what's going on. So, this was the act with only 3 chapters. So we're just gonna go right into chapter 4. So they go back to the alley where Helen first investigated the case. And there's this thing, which is another thing. Here we go, Act 4. So she has this thing where, like, Haraniel asked her a question, and she goes, Haraniel made me want to rip my own hair out sometimes. It has been like an hour. She has been, like, familiar with Haraniel for probably, like, an hour or 2. There's not a time elaborated in the book, but I can't imagine that it took that long, especially, like, if you look at, like, the timeline of when I just introduced it to you, and now I'm here. I can't, like, you haven't been around them long. It's been, like, 2 hours. 3 at max. It could not have been that long for you to be like, makes me want to rip my own hair out sometimes. Like, what do you mean sometimes? You don't know them. You don't know them. How can you say sometimes? Anyway. Again, there's a lot of little just details that are weirded, strange, that, like, irk me. And, like, it's not... I get that it's a novella. I get that it's short. However, I think some of the concepts definitely could have been elaborated upon more. Anyway. After some investigating, they've determined that the vampire is possessing people to commit the murders. And so they get on a lead on a girl named Mathilda Van Horn, who was the one who was possessed for the murder of Mick and Tyree, which is why the trail stopped at the middle of the intersection. It's where the demon left her body. So they go to Dunning, which is this mental asylum, to see Mathilda's status, because after being possessed by a demon, her brain was just kind of broken. And then Haraniel starts to do, like, a prayer for her, before she just starts screaming her head off. Because of her screaming, doctors come in and they escort her to a waiting room. Well, they calm Mathilda down, and then Helen sees someone that she recognizes from, like, seeing at the wink, but it's worded really weirdly, and I had to reread the page, like, 5 times, because I was like, what is happening? And it is... here, I think. Yes. So... it's right at the beginning of chapter 3 of this act, and she says, I took clammy hands off Mrs. Van Horn's shoulder and tried to swallow, but my mouth was a desert. Harriet. Oh God. She hadn't been around the wink in the last couple of months. Now I knew why. Dunning had gotten her. And then, on the next page, it goes, Harriet sat perfectly still, her mouth shaped around an unspoken word. Then she smiled to break my heart. She got on her feet and shuffled out of the common room on ballet pink slippers, never looking back. I hated myself for the relief that dripped over my skin, for the knot in my stomach going slack. Did I know anyone else there? I hoped not. Oh, that's it? And, like, the way that it just suddenly cuts from, like, comforting Mathilda's mother, who had been there when they showed up at the, asylum, to suddenly cutting to, like, Harriet. Oh god. Like, it doesn't be like, I saw Harriet across the room, it's just Harriet. And I was like, who's Harriet? Is Mrs. Van Horn the Harriet? Like, it was worded really weird, and so I had to reread the page, like, 2 or 3 times to understand what was going on. Which, like, I shouldn't have to reread it 2 or 3 times. Anyway, past that, Helen deduces a few other people at Dunning were victims of possession. I'm not gonna go through how she deduces it, but she deduces it. But they, like, react to Herenial in a way that Helen is like, hang on. The vampire is an angel, not a demon. I couldn't exactly explain to you how she deduces this. It's, like, so... It felt kind of convoluted to me. If you read it, it, like, makes sense, but I just don't know how to describe it with words. But they deduce that it's an angel, not a demon, that's been possessing them. So, the angels possessing people are fallen angels, but they're not demons? It's not, I don't know, it's not elaborated upon. So, some of these fallen angels think that if they live out lives as humans, they'll go back to heaven when their host dies, which is, like, what Herenial is doing with Edith. But whoever this White City vampire is doesn't believe this, and so is killing humans with soul debts, has to be, like, guilt-free, and is like, oh, they don't matter because they sold their souls, to try and use that power to open a gateway back to heaven. So, chapter 5 of this chapter, Helen is like, I need food and I need a nap, and this was pissing me off again. I'm like, girl, you are on a time limit for your soul. You do not have time to go and take a nap. You can eat, get something fast. I think McDonald's existed at this time, right? It's 1941. Were there McDonald's? There might have been. I don't know. I'd have to fact check that, and I'm not going to do it right now, so you guys can correct me in the comments. But she, like, goes to a diner to, like, get, like, the Sunday special or whatever. Edith comes back, Herenial, like, goes dormant again, and then after eating, they go home to take a rest, and I'm like, I want you to actually, like, lock in. Your soul is at risk. Please lock in. You do not have time for this. Anyway, chapter 6 of Act 4, they're resting, and then Ted broke all her wards because he wanted to talk to her, and it leaves her entire building exposed. And I wrote stupid, like, 3 times as I was reading this chapter, because it made me so mad that he, like, didn't think about it at all. He's like, I broke all your wards, because I missed you. Can we talk? And she's like, I have a phone. And he's like, yes, but I wanted to talk to you in person. She's like, he probably had fun breaking all of my wards. I'm like, I know he's your brother, but, like, you should be a little more mad. So we're in the last act. I'm trying to slow down. I know that I talk very fast, and I'm trying to not do that. Okay. So Helen talks to Ted about what she knows in the case, and he did not know that it was an angel possessing people for the murders. He knew that an angel was, like, responsible for the murders, but he didn't know that it was, like, possessing innocent people. But he was, like, aware that the angel was, like, killing people with soul debts, and so he was like, whatever. And then Delaney shows up because her wards are gone, and he is also an angel, and he kidnaps Ted because the vampire wants to use him as a host. I don't know why it would need a host, though, if they want to just open the gate to heaven back up. But okay, because, like, the point of having the gate open is to not need host, is to just go back. So, I didn't really get that, but that was what was going on. So, chapter 2 of Act 5. Herenial comes back and notices the wards are gone. And we have this segment, which I felt like was also weird. And so Herenial says, Elena, here and now, what happened to the wards? I let go of the breath I'd strangled to keep from screaming. Where'd they go? I don't know. Herenial dragged me back to the room where my bed rested. The wards, Elena, what happened? We were protected. And then she says, Ted got cute and broke them all when he busted in to talk to me. And, like, I don't know why she asked where'd they go. Like, she knew, like, she talked earlier in Act 4, at, like, the end of Act 4, that he had broken her wards. So I don't know why she asked where'd they go, when it's, like, you knew. Why did you ask? Why are you asking this? You know where they went. Your brother broke them. And then, because then immediately after she goes, Ted got cute and broke them all. So you do know. Why did you ask the angel where they went when you know that your brother is the one that broke them? I'm not trying to, like, harp on these. I'm just trying to make sure that I am, like, being clear with, like, what's bothering me about it. Because sometimes I will say things and it's not clear. So I'm, like, trying to be clear. So I hope it's clear. So they head back to the church to try and talk to Zashiel for help. And it turns out that Zashiel is the vampire. Surprise! So Ted's tied up for sacrifice, and I thought he was going to be a host. I don't know. They talk about wanting him as a host, but Helen basically, like, screams her thoughts at him to make sure he was, like, paying attention, before she, like, threw him a lockpick, but then she hears his voice back in her head, as him, like, acknowledging that she has his attention, but, like, she's never read thoughts in the entire book, but she doesn't acknowledge that. She's like, oh, I've never heard thoughts before, and, like, if she did, it should have been something that was said in the book. Just my opinion. And then Zashiel attacks Haranil, which essentially knocks them unconscious so that Edith comes back out, which leaves Helen as the only one in the situation who can really do anything. And she uses the silk handkerchief, remember, from Act 2, Chapter 1, remember that one silk handkerchief that she bought, and then it wasn't talked about again? She uses that to summon Marlowe. Don't know why it had to be a silk handkerchief, don't know why that's, like, because she doesn't talk about summoning Marlowe until I think, like, Chapter 3 of Act 2, but she bought the silk handkerchiefs in Chapter 1, Act 2? I don't know. But she summons Marlowe with the silk handkerchief. And then, because Marlowe has now confronted the vampire, Helen gets her soul back! Yay! So she can live out the life that she wants. So Helen begins fighting Zashiel to try and slow them down so she, Ted, and Edith can escape, but she gets knocked off of her feet when Zashiel goes to attack her, and Edith was behind her, and Zashiel ends up stabbing Edith and killing her. And I did cry. This was another part where I did cry, because I was like, oh, they tried so hard. So Ted uses a knife dropped by Haranil earlier and stabs Zashiel, which ends the fight. Marlowe helped in there, like, a little bit, but, like, she didn't really do anything. So then Helen immediately sells her soul back to Marlowe to bring Edith back, which, like, oh, made my heart hurt. Good, and, like, knowing that, because then this resets her timer back to the 10 years and being like, oh, my heart, the 10 years. But Ted is like, why would you do that? You just got your soul back. And Helen was like, well, you stabbed an angel, so you're also going to HE double hockey sticks with me. Fun fact, you're also screwed. And then the final chapter is Helen and Edith, and they just talk about going to San Francisco. It's a nice little wrap up. But then, like, Edith brings up that, like, Helen's, like, final day on Earth was, like, her supposed to be final day on Earth was her birthday, which was not mentioned at all in the book that it was going to be her birthday. Not at all. Not once. Which I feel like, again, of, like, they've been, like, dating for 2 years, they're talking about moving across the country, that, like, Edith would have said something of, like, oh, your birthday, like, something. I don't know. I feel like there would have been more, and it wasn't. And then suddenly the last chapter was like, oh, you were going to die on your birthday. That's really sad. Just, it wasn't a relevant detail. And if you wanted it to be a relevant detail, then it should have been brought up earlier in the book. But that's the end of it. There's a lot of questions unanswered, a lot of things not elaborated upon, as you can see, but it did make me cry, so there is that, and I do like a book that makes me cry. Overall, I give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Um, that's just how I felt about it. I feel like there could have been more done with it. Yeah, that's really all I have. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've read the book, leave a comment on your thoughts on it. If you want to recommend me another book that will make me cry, you can do that. And I will see you all in the next one. Take care, everyone.